See, a lot of people made the smart choice. I'm not referring to you guys. Hi everyone. We're good. My name is Amit, and I'm going to talk about cyber today. Love the word cyber. CyberCrime, cyber war. I'm going to mention it a lot, so if you're allergic to the terminology, please excuse me. If you have a better alternative, I'll be more than glad to replace those worn out words. I do have a day job, and this does not blah 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 blah. If you really care about this presentation and have a lot of opinions about it, if they're good, hire us. If they're bad, I've got nothing to do with. They've got nothing to do with what I do. That's basically it. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to talk about cyber war, and to be able to talk about cyber war, we're going to put some terminology in place and talk about attack and defense. We're going to do the same for cybercrime, and then we'll get to the meat, which is connecting the dots. And this entire talk is just about connecting the dots. It's about realizing what kind of interactions and relationships exist between criminals, black hats, I've got to say the ones that I've seen are a little better than the example we've seen before, and governments, basically. Nations, states, whatever you want to call them. We're going to take a quick look at the future and see how screwed we are and how we can try to fix it. And that's basically it. If you have any questions, if you want to call bullshit on anything that I say, please feel free. I know that for a fact that some of this is probably not true. So, probably. So who am I? What makes me stand here and talk to you guys and have your attention? I'm a computer science. I have a computer science degree. I'm a hacker. I'm a researcher. I used to manage research for a few security companies in the past, focusing on web security and malware. I used to be on the other side as well, which means development. I wasn't that good at it, and it kind of bored me, so I switched back to breaking stuff, which is better. And in my spare time, I do some reserve duty at the Israeli Air Force, and that's about it. Funny, huh? This is one of my favorite things here.
What's that? To be belt Turkish. No, Tommy, there's a gun in your trousers. What is a gun doing in your trousers? For protection. Protection from what? The Germans.
Yeah. This is what I'm trying to avoid from the most. And please, 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 this is like a very intimate setting. If you see or hear me, or whatever, talk bullshit, just call it out. Please, I beg you, I give you permission to shout profanities and just stop me. I'll be, again, more than happy, and this presentation has been through a lot, and got some more data removed. I got some data removed, some data fixed, because of great people that actually put me in place. So don't be afraid, I'm not going to bite unless you really want me to. How did I get into this whole mess of saying cyber so much? Well, the story is very simple. I basically started some research doing very technical stuff, forensics and looking into malware and trying to find it, blah 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 blah, all the good stories. And at some point of time, last year, during some research, I started looking into the motives, into why are black hats doing black hat things, and I started researching kind of the economy of cybercrime and who's connected to who, and how does malware get authored, distributed, marketed, managed, processed, all the business model of cybercrime. And at one point of time, we found a big stash of data, a criminal server that we managed to get a glance into and really expose what's going on in the back end. And we started seeing some stuff that didn't make sense on the business level of cybercrime. which means that stuff that you can't really sell on the open market, like this. I hate those pictures. This is a screenshot that I took from a PowerPoint presentation found on the criminal server. That screenshot depicts a satellite photo, probably using Google Maps or whatever it is, with 12-digit GPS locations of targets, along with a slide that depicts the timeline for a training, drill, test, something using cool tools like F-16s and ground-to-ground, whatever, engagements, which again, it's kind of funky because it's not sellable on the open market. And obviously it's PowerPoint, so it's being presented to management or whoever it is, so there are conclusions and pretty graphs of how accurate were the bomb runs with, like, you know, the spread and this and that, and this is target 1, this is target 2. And alongside, I mean, this is bad enough, and it kind of spurred my attention to, well, what do I do with this? As if it wasn't bad enough, we also found this, which was probably the reason for the whole PowerPoint. This is a screenshot, again, from the software that was found on the criminal server that was stolen from someone else's server, which is a software that controls error scenario or error something. You probably can't really see this, but this is like the description of the highlighted item, which is an F-16D. You've got some more F-16s around here. There's an AH-64. Anyone knows what that is? It's an Apache. There's a log here of events by time, of when a weapon was launched, when it hit, what's the accuracy, blah, 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 blah. So very, very interesting information. Finally declassified, which was a big fight because I was trying to explain to the authorities that this wasn't public. I mean, if I can get to the server, anyone can get to the server. I mean, seriously. And everyone was kind of denying that it existed, it happened, and it's like, Elvis is dead or alive, and so I can show this now without like flipping through this really quickly and asking for a video to like erase everything. And that kind of stuck as a sore thumb in last year's research because I couldn't really do anything with it, and it didn't fit my slides. So I just kind of put it in the end and said, oh, by the way, we also found this, and kind of walked off the stage. But it didn't really end there because I was looking into what was going on, and one of the conclusions from last year was, let's try to LoJack the data and track it and see where it ends up. And surprising, I was surprised by myself that I actually did what I recommended. And we found that data again. And we didn't find it in like the usual places. It wasn't traded in the usual crime or market, or cybercrime market. It got to a different state, a different company that was, again, involved in making all sorts of software like this. So, that was just the appetizer. Let's talk about cybercrime and cyber war. Okay, first question, and this is going to be interactive, I hope. What is this? Yeah, what? Bullet hole, all right. What can you tell me about the bullet hole? You can't. You can tell me that it's a bullet hole, that it hits some metal, but you don't have the context. And this is what I felt that I was doing for a very, very long time. From a forensic point of view, from a consulting point of view, from a research point of view, we've been focusing on the bullet holes, all right? On the little dents that were left in our organizations or the organizations we're working for, but we couldn't put the bullet holes in context, and this is exactly what this talk tries to do. We're going to try and see if the bullet hole is part of a warfare event or a criminal event, all right? Is this like a drive-by, gangbang, whatever, or part of a war? And to talk about, again, crime and war is pretty easy. They're not that different. There's a little difference in financing, there's a little difference in backing, but there are a lot of resources available to both. And funnily, they actually share some resources once in a while because of the expertise needed for both markets. So let's start with cyber war. This is the Wikipedia definition, which I'm going to bash in about 7 minutes. And the definition states that cyber warfare is the use of computers and the internet in conducting warfare in cyberspace. And it's missing a big thing. Again, we'll talk about it in a second. Some people say that there's no cyber war. Some people that I really respect, but I love this picture. And this is the guy responsible for cyber whatever. I mean, you get the job and then you say there's no need for me. Brilliant career move. And they usually pretext this with, well, it didn't really happen, or there is no cyber war except. And then they start, going through, different events: Estonia, Georgia, Titan Rain, India, Google, Adobe, whatever it is. So there's always some kind of a except for. My view is that they've just not been connecting the dots. Okay? If you connect the dots, you can see what's going on. If you pull back from your focus on the bullet hole, you might be able to see what's going on. Cyber war is not just nation versus nation. All right? It's not just Pentagon versus Kremlin. It's neither, just spy versus spy, covert channels, spooks in suits, and so on and so forth. But it always, just like any other war, will yield some kind of civilian casualties or civilian resources that are going to be at stake. It's war, all right?
What's that picture?
It's a bombed out something I found. Sorry. Some residential building that got smashed. Yeah. Bombs have a side effect. So I've been told. Yeah. Yeah, it's not like an implosion. These are this is still from McAfee with their permission. This is from their 2009 Virtual Criminology Report. I love their titles, and this is titled Countries Developing Advanced Offensive Cyber Capabilities. You see the usual suspects, the US and Russia, China, of course. There's France here for some reason. I'm not dissing France, but it's just, I haven't seen a lot of cyber warfare capabilities, but again, this is just my view. I pretexted that. And a little country here. I didn't put it there. I can't put it there. All right. In this context, and this context only, size does not matter. These are the countries that I'm going to focus on in this talk. It's, again, usual suspects: US, Russia, China. I'm going to throw into the mix Iran because I didn't ran, and there are in the mix, and there have been a lot of things going on there, and the little green dot in the middle is Iran. So let's start again with the usual suspects. The US. It's fairly well documented what's going on there. I just finished reading the report from the cyber drill number 2 or something like that. I can't remember. It's back in the apartment. So there's a lot of documentation. You see again the usual names that we always see: NSA, the Stratcom, the aggregation of all the 4 different cyber commands in the military, Navy, and so on and so forth. And other 3-letter acronyms. This is my favorite one, not because of what they do, but because of the logo and the name. It's called CAT, and they have like a vicious cat there. It's the FBI Cyber Action Team. And they must have run out of acronyms. So, Russia. Again, this is just a kind of a quick overview of the nations. In Russia, we have the GRU, which is the main intelligence directorate of the Russian armed forces. We have the SVR, that used to be called, no, it's not the one. Foreign intelligence. We have the FSB, that used to be the KGB, for federal security services inside. Again, they're kind of, there's a whole jurisdiction thing, outside, inside. Everyone thinks they own the world, so they do all of it, they deal with all over the place. One of my favorite, and they have the coolest logos ever, by the way. This is just me. And the coolest institute that I found there is just called, plainly, Center for Research of Military Strength of Foreign Countries. I mean, why beat around the bush? Just, this is what we do. Last but not least, they have several national youth associations. They're called NASHI in Russia. And they're very interesting because they're highly connected to the political party. They are. And they're kind of, it's like Boy Scouts for advanced. Very interesting, very motivated, and highly targeted. China, again, surprisingly enough, very, very well documented. Everything falls under the PLA, the army. I'm not going to bore you with more details because you can read this yourself. It's open material. Northrop Grumman had a great report on how the army works, what they do with the cyber. The GSD, the 4th Department, and the 3rd Department, Office and Defense, and yes, Titan Rain happened, and again, well documented. And I'm not going to be, not going to bring any surprises to the table here. Iran. Iran is interesting because it's much less documented, and it's a little easier to track because again, everything falls under one organization. One particular interesting fact is that they have the telecommunications infrastructure company, the only telecommunication infrastructure company that can call itself a telecommunication infrastructure company, which is a monopoly. They're controlled by the government and basically reporting and working very closely with the armed forces, with the army. Now, if you look at, I took this camera for work, but this is the wired connectivity in Iran over the years. This is fiber optic cables running in thousands. Look what happened since 2005, 6. Right? They basically doubled their internet connectivity, and now it's just massive. And everything is controlled by this company, which is reporting to the army. Okay, so very, very tight control over egress and egress. This is going to be a very boring slide because I can't tell you a lot about what's going on there. There is a fair amount of documentation. You can Google it. We have the IDF, which is the Israeli army and the defense forces, which is knowingly and publicly developing cyber capabilities, both in the Air Force, in the Army, and in the intelligence community. We have C4Is, just like any other army, which stands for Command, Control, Communication, Computers, and Intelligence. It's a small branch in each of the corps that's responsible for cyber, basically. Staffing, again, for those of you who don't know, is mostly homegrown. Everyone in Israel is obliged to serve 3 years in the army, and once you're 18. So you can't really recruit, hackers with 10 years of experience unless they start acting at 8. But because of that, there's a lot of training going on inside the army, a lot of resources put into qualifying those soldiers and making them hackers. Another agency that there's in Israel is the Mossad, obviously. Again, they became very, very open in the last few years. They have a website, you can go to it, you can look for jobs, and by the job section, which is what I usually do for every company I start working with, you can figure out what they do, right, or what they're planning to do. So take a look there, use Google Translate, it's eye-opening, it's frightening sometimes. All right, so let's talk about cyber war. An attack in cyber war, for me, is always a highly selective targeting of military and critical resources in conjunction with a kinetic attack. It's a war, okay? This is the bashing of the Wikipedia definition, which I think is lacking that kinetic portion. Okay, cyber war will usually not just stand by itself. It can be a very small kinetic action, but there's got to be a kinetic action. Again, in my book. Or a massive denial of service, all right? So we're moving from very selective, very targeted, to just blanking out a telco, okay? And we're going to look at the examples. That's usually used to disrupt, to assist ground forces, or to spread, or to prevent propaganda, all right? Change public opinion or affect public opinion. In terms of defense, it's never always military. Okay, defenses are always going to include, as we saw that they're always civilian at stake. They're always going to include critical infrastructure, telecommunications, power, electricity, and sometimes defensively you would choose to shut down things just to prevent them from being blown up, or you would choose to shut down access to systems just to keep them running. In light of a denial of service attack or some very, very high load that the system's been exposed to.
So,
yeah.
Do you see cyber espionage and counter-espionage as another entity outside of cyber war?
I see it as part of cyber war. And
is that like the second component?
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's part of prepared for war. I don't think that war can be defined in, all right, we start now, all right, and we end now, that's it.
There's not a kinetic component in intelligence gathering operations, but I agree that I think they go together.
I agree that there's not a lot of kinetic components. When I'm saying kinetic, it's not just blowing stuff up. It's getting people,
a physical
talking, a physical interaction.
So you need psyops completely into your cyber war application?
I do what? Sorry.
You need psyops, human.
Yeah, definitely. Again, units and everything is part of this big definition that's called war. Okay. CyberCrime. This sums up cybercrime from my perspective. If you don't see this when you talk about cybercrime, you're doing it wrong. You're missing the point. All right. Criminals don't do just this, for fun. And they don't do this for shits and giggles. They do this for the money. If you can't see the money, if you can't track the money, it's not cybercrime. It's just pranks. This is how the business works. It works again as a business. There's a CEO, there's the boss, there are like VPs under bosses, and there are campaign managers that take care of spreading or managing specific campaigns. It's very, very targeted. It will look into geographies, different niches of market, languages. Very selective, very efficient, and just works again like a business. From the attack side, we've all seen this before. We know the usual suspect, the Trojans, the crimeware, the malware coming through mail, web, open services. I'm not going to bring anything new to this, but on the global scale, in terms of geography, this is what it looks like when we're talking about cybercrime. Again, remember the first line about cybercrime? The big pile of money? Guess where the money is? Okay? And this image was created after tracking a criminal, the big criminal server in 2009. And what we did here was to map out all the websites that were compromised and include the malware. And And again, this is the generalization, you can't really pinpoint a website, but this is where the websites belong to. This is where the criminals were targeting their attacks on to get money. So again, east and west of the US, there's no money here for some reason, or no servers or websites. Excuse me? That's my web server there. It's cheap hosting. Western Europe, okay, and some parts of China and Japan. Again, looking for the money, looking for your targets in the locations that you're bound to find them. This is how it looks like in terms of the actual groups running the campaigns. All right, the groups actually are located again in those areas because they need to be specialized. They need to know the language, the culture, the news. All right, what's going on? We'll see a lot of just open the news any day of the year. Whatever's hot is going to be used to spread malware. All right, it's easy. If you Google, I don't know, Paris Hilton got whatever today, because she did. Criminals will use that and either set up new websites that contain those keywords to attract innocent customers to, or infect existing websites because they're dragging a lot of attention. In terms of tools, the ammo, again, the usual suspects. This is a screenshot of one of my favorite, you can call it, tools used in the criminal world. It's Zeus. Okay, I think we've seen some examples before, but this is what the tool looks like when you actually try to use it. You get a GUI, all right? You configure it. You're not really required to hack anything. You're not even required to know, computer science or stuff like that. You just need to know how to use a GUI and tell it what to do. And each time you click this little button, you'll get a new binary. And each click of that button will generate a version with detection rates ranging from 30% to maybe 50%. And if it really screws up in terms of AV detection for like 40-something AVs. So this is pretty efficient. If you click enough times or buy like a better version, the detection rates go down to like the single digit. This is what it looks like. This is the other side of the tool. This is again the command control center. All you have to do is you download this little package, you run it on your web server, configure it. It's very basic. It's got an installer. It configures the database and everything needed, and you can just control your army of bots. Okay, very efficient. Again, very easy to use. It's just all click and run. Defense, this is going to be very short. Anti-something, virus, malware, Trojan, spyware, whatever it is, we've seen the detection rates, okay? And then you must say, all right, there's firewalls, IDSs, IPSs. Seriously? We all know how that works. Okay? It's just not. And just encrypted. Blind, completely blind. All right, case closed, defenses are done. So how do we connect these? We've got exactly 30 minutes to connect them. My claim is that cybercrime is being used to conduct cyber war. I might even rephrase it, or to say abused, or is working with state nations to launch cyber war. To prove my claim, we need to take a little stroll down history lane and see how past events have happened. I had to put this, all right, because it happened. I don't really like it because there wasn't a lot of kinetic kind of effect in the Estonia war, cyber war. And again, read all about it. I'm not going to bore you with details that other researchers made huge names on. Just focusing on this. Bottom line is that civilian infrastructure in Estonia, which is a small state running on the internet apparently, was attacked from civilian networks. Okay? You would expect the attack to come from, I don't know, kremlin.gov.ru, but it didn't. For some reason, it ran from a lot of civilian networks, home DSLs, companies, hosting services from Russia. Israel. Okay? Israel actually participated or was involved in some shape or form in what we've defined together as cyber warfare. A couple of examples. My favorite one, Operation Orchard. Anyone heard about it? It's a beautiful thing. This is what happened in Operation Orchard. This is from Der Spiegel. Why is that? Okay. This is the before and after. Okay, this is a nuclear facility in Syria that this happened to it. Something happened to it on September. Yeah, I'm saying something happened to it because there's a terminology being used a lot in Israel that goes according to foreign sources. So according to foreign sources, planes, aircrafts, F-16s, F-15s, came into Syria one day, September 6th, my birthday, it's a little present they gave me, and nuked the shit out of this facility. There was a lot of controversy around this, because, I don't know if you know, but to get, allegedly Israel did this, and to get from Israel to Syria, to that specific location, you have to go, obviously, through Syria, but also through some parts of Turkey. The embarrassing thing about this whole operation, which again I think is brilliant, is that no one could actually attest to the fact that they saw, electronically, any aircraft crossing borders or coming in and out or whatever. So, unless we have some phantom technology that, beam me outside, I'm got the Syrian nuclear facility, beam me down, I'm gone. There was some kind of involvement on the cyber front to make those airplanes disappear, which is hard. Alright, it's a big fucking plane. And we don't have stealth fighters like the rich Americans, so we have to make them stealthy. So this is a prime example, I think, of, again, cyber warfare as I like to see it, which is part of general warfare. Right? Kinetic, cyber, making things happen, synchronized, so on and so forth. Some more activities on the cyber front. There have been a lot of collisions between local stuff in Gaza and Lebanon. Cast-led, Second Lebanon War, included some cyber activities. This happened in Israel. All right, it was like a banner, an advertisement. Download our software and join the cyber army or whatever, so that will attack Arab news facilities and stuff like that. And a lot of those attacks were attributed obviously to hacktivists. This is not government sponsored. It's not like gov.il and you'll see this. The same thing happened on the other side. A lot of hacktivism, which is somewhat guided, somewhat misguided. An interesting fact about what's going on the other side is a forum or a group called AR-Hack, Arabic hackers. It's a hacker forum by day and a cybercrime operation by night. So they're kind of hacktivists, by day, fun and games, but there's another part of it which is just proper cybercrime. And this is how it looks like. This is the forum talking, kill all the infidels, blah, 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 and let's bomb their, cellular networks and kill their internet, and let's buy and sell cards for half their balance, and the usual, criminals operation stuff, selling 1,600 Visa cards. This is all in Arab, but you can translate it easily. If you want the URLs, just let me know, or go to arhack or look for Arab hackers. And getting into the forum is fairly easy. Again, use a lot of Google Translate, and you're in. Georgia. Down is Israel. No questions. Georgia. this is the most interesting research that I think I've done and looked into. Again, it's interesting because it was very, very synchronized. And when I'm talking synchronized, again, it's kinetic and cyber. What happened there, is that we saw, again, the attacks launched from civilian networks. Later we'll connect them to very specific networks that were targeting websites on the Georgian side. And they happened right on time with the actual troop movements from Russia to Georgia. So they're kind of blanking out specific website news outlets so the news wouldn't come out in Georgia as troops crossed over. So it really helped. It was kind of a proof of concept for Russia to test their relationships with whoever ran those attacks, and it kind of proved correctly. To understand how the Russian side works, we'll have to take a quick look at those names. It must ring a bell to, some of those must ring a bell to some of you. Micronet, Nikolo, Atrivo, RBN, AST domains, they're all Russian outlets, or hacker outlets, criminal, that are running criminal operations. Okay, CyberCrime. This is how it looks like in terms of some relationships, and I threw in the Russian government because there are some interesting connections. Atrivo is hosted by UKR Telegroup and Hostfresh. Hostfresh is registered in China, UKR Telegroup in Ukraine. Atrivo is registered in Denver or California, I can't remember where. Atrivo is a customer of EST Domains, which is a customer of the RBN. The RBN is running from Russia itself and have very close political ties to the government. The network provider for Hostfresh and UKR Telegroup is the RBN again. So you can see how that ties in. These are all criminal outlets, EST Domains, Nikolo, that I can say they're criminal and not get sued because they actually got sued themselves. And you probably know the Nikolo story that was shut down, spam dropped like 70% and then grew back to its normal sizes in 4 weeks. The interesting fact is that RBN and Nikolo are connected to the Russian government. RBN is actually backed by the Russian government, which keeps it running. Why? Money. Okay? And so the ties are too obvious to ignore between crime and government in the Russian, in the state of nation of Russia. So how did that Russian-Georgia thing work? It started by picking on the president, like you always do, just, nag the boss. DDoS the president's website, and then the command control servers that were running those botnets that attacked the website were shut down. As troops crossed over the border, we had a few days of silence because, ground stuff happening, shooting, whatever. And then 6 new command control servers came up that started attacking additional sites. On top of the president, the parliament, some news organizations, basically targeting, again, government and news sites to kind of, help the war and shut things down. Interestingly enough, those command control servers, at the same time, were attacking other things. Multitasking, exactly. Or, as we call it, usual business, which is attacking porn sites, card forums, gambling sites, adult escort services, Nazi racist sites, web money, web gold, etc., etc., which is classic cybercrime, extortion. If you run a successful enough site on the internet gambling things, you'll get to know these guys, I promise you. Okay, it's called protection. Connecting the dots here is like trivial, all right? I don't even have to be creative to, pull stuff out of my sleeve. Same command control servers running cyber war, again, highly synchronized to the ground troops, and running their usual business on the same IP address. Smart, maybe, and safe, probably not. It's the government. Iran. Another interesting event. We all remember the 2009 Twitter. Twitter's gone. I don't have any friends. Blah blah blah. the DNS attack was attributed to Iranian activity. Political connections are just too obvious to ignore. Okay, if you remember the timing, if you look back at the time machine, you'll see a lot of protests running inside Iran opposing the government, alongside some UN Council decisions to ban or extend the ban on trade in Iran or something like that. So it was just happened to be on the right time. This is what Twitter looked like. For a chance it wasn't boring. On the day of the attack, this is the defacements of the Iranian cyber army. The site has been hacked by Iranian cyber army, blah, blah, blah. There's a Gmail address if you want to contact us. Yeah. For more, please contact iraniancyberarmy@gmail.com. Yeah.
Did they achieve this hack by changing the
DNS
servers Twitter?
Yeah.
Did they do that by hacking the DNS server? Or?
No, they did that by hacking using stealing the passwords for the DNS administration that was not run by Twitter. It was run by some third-party company where you can log in and say, oh, my A record is not this anymore. And this is what it looked like when you Googled it. And this is Twitter. This site has been hacked by Iranian cyber army. Now, Iranian cyber army, surprisingly enough, is not something that you run into any day, right? It's not something that you ran into before October, give or take, 2009. It just did not exist. Okay? What did exist was a group called ASEAN. ASEAN is a group very similar to AR Hack that we've seen before. It's a Shiite group from Iran that's like they have a forum and hacking and stuff like that. And these are some of their defacements. If you take a closer look at the HTML template, blah, 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 you'll see that it's very, very similar, if not the same, as the Iranian cyber army hacking. And this is kind of going back in history of their defacement that they used. Right? That template was available and still is available at the ASEAN Group's forum sites for use of the members that are doing whatever they do. It's the same pro-Hezbollah messages that Twitter attack had, and the Iranian cyber army is actually a group inside the forums of ASEAN. Okay? So it was set up specifically inside ASEAN to conduct this specific attack for some reason. Okay? Let's take a look at other operations from ASEAN. In the forums, again, it's a fascinating forum. You should log in and whatever. And there's a section called War Games. This is what they do in War Games. In War Games, what you do is you set a target. The forum manager says, all right, War Games today is on chestergas.com. Okay? Here are the rules of engagement. All right? This is what you need to do. To win points, you need to take data, or get control over servers, or do this or do that. And it's like the least points are for defacements and the usual stuff. And this is kind of, a game, training. Okay? This is training. ChesterGas.com is the website for the Chester County National Gas Authority in South Carolina, I think. This is training. Okay? The targets are not, randomly pulled. There are specific targets that they're looking for. This is national infrastructure. Okay? This is training in ASEAN. What else happened on the 18th? Anyone's birthday or? Anyone remember what happened December 18th? Something big. Not just Twitter. Again, Twitter is big enough by itself. Nothing? Yeah, I'm not making this up. Iranian troops crossed the border to Iraq, seized an oil well, and said, it's mine. Yeah, exactly. Why didn't anyone hear about it? Because Twitter was there. Everyone was busy with what's up with Twitter. give it a fail whale, anything, just not this, hacked website. Again, this is highly targeted, synchronized, not by coincidence. All right, we've seen the training, we've seen how they work, we know the MO. The MO, by the way, for a Twitter attack is very, very close to the MO of criminal attacks that we're seeing, okay, that are targeting companies. More recently, the Baidu takedown, same MO, all right, stealing credentials for the DNS servers, taking down Baidu. There's a whole, thing going on between Iran and China for some reason, but apparently that's how they work things out. Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of a quick recap of how ASEAN or Iran operates in terms of cybercrime and cyber war. ASEAN is running the usual, botnet, DDoS, site defacements, credit cards and theft, and so on and so forth. Targeting the US, UK, money, DDoS on Iran, Iraq, apparently. And inside ASEAN is the Iranian Cyber Army that is a little more strategic in terms of its targets and operations, targeting the US and China. Okay? The border between crime and war, not really clear. All right? And we've seen the training, we've seen how they operate, we've seen the MO, and connecting the dots is just trivial. I'm going to skip through China, if you'll excuse me, because it's been, played over and over and over. Google, Adobe, 40 other companies got screwed in the whatever, and everyone was blaming China. China was saying, it's a classic. China was just saying, it's not me. Everyone was like, it's China! Wasn't me. And the best part was, they blamed the US and actually helped track down some of the sources of that, alleged sources of the attack back to the US. I mean, the whole geographic thing is all screwed up because it's internet. And believe me, you can connect the dots. Hola! We're in Spain. And there are actually some Spanish, really good hackers, and a lot of activity is going on in the criminal as well as the cyber war thing front. Anyone know what this is in Spanish? Mariposa. Okay? Blue butterfly or whatever, or a brand of butterfly. 12 million bots. Respectable for people who eat lunch for an hour and a half. I'll give them creds. The software itself was written by a hacker or hacker group in Slovenia. All right, let's start the conspiracy theory. The outreach was global, which was way beyond what it was initially intended for, as I believe. And we've heard stories of, projects that kind of blew out of scope and it's like, ooh, I got shitloads of stuff that I don't need. And there's a lot of government involvement in terms of who got hit and who was involved in the following investigations. And there's, for some reason, a lot of investment from different governments in getting the Mariposa guys. The bottom line is that 3 people were arrested February 2010, a few months ago. I'm going to butcher the names, but Net Cairo, Johnny Lolente, and Austriator, the Spanish names are beyond my pronunciation, are part of the DDP, Dias de Pasadilla group, Days of, what is it? Nightmare. Yeah, Nightmare, sorry. Days of Nightmare. They were arrested and taken down all that crap, but it did not end there. The investigation was actually going after the guy who wrote the software. First time that I've actually heard about it, that someone is actually going for the software creator. Why? Remember global reach? Remember Slovenia? In July 2010, Slovenian police arrested their source, right? Izerdo. Izerdo, who sold the kit to hundreds of additional individuals and governments. I'm doing a really shitty job because I should have just quoted the website like the news source. There are multiple. It's for real, okay? the best attestment of what was going on. The FBI called the Slovenian operation excellent and unparalleled. Excuse my language, but what the fuck does the FBI has to do with tracking down the Slovenian creator and reseller of a botnet that was running from Spain?
It's like the other one.
Yeah.
Mine.
Okay. The story is not does not have closure yet. There's still a lot of investigations going on tracking the Izerdo, which is, if you flip it back in Slovenian, it's savior. As part of open intelligence cases. So I can't really give you the huge news of here's how everything ties together. I'm sorry, but yeah, give me a minute. But this is just what happened. Quick few words on the future. Oracle, what do you see? What is this? Quickly, OLPC. All right. What happens when you put one of these, unprotected, no real security protection, technically, whatever it is, in a third world nation, it gets infected? You get a pretty nice sized botnet running from, South Africa or West Africa, all in your disposal and free to roam. The nukes, all right, of the future are not, there's no internet kill switch, right? No one is inventing the O-Day that's going to kill us all. It's still connectivity.
Are you saying we're going to bomb Africa?
No. No. It's still internet connectivity. The bigger connectivity that you have, the more power you have, all right? In this case, size does matter, right? This is the currency of the future. This is the currency that we need to deal with in terms of crime as well as war, all right? This can be used to shut down a gambling site as well as a government. We've seen the good formal training on cybersecurity and in governments and in companies and a lot of investment going into it. The bad news is that commercial development of malware is still king, and the ugly is that these two connect. All right, you'll see a lot of governments, a lot of organizations, legitimate ones, buying and using software that was created on the bad side to their advantage, either to learn or to cut corners because you don't need to reinvent the wheel. What to do is fix this legislation. All right, there is still a notion of countries in the internet. Okay, forget it. All the work that's been done right now by law enforcement, especially in Europe, by the way, this is phenomenal, of connecting police forces and breaking the barriers in terms of criminal investigations on the internet should be applied to the politics as well. All right, and what's better than using existing treaties that are being done on the nuclear side and just adapting them to the cyber war side? All right, it's the same thing. These are nukes. These are nukes. They're just behaving differently. Okay. Any questions? Yeah.
I've seen instances of national communications authorities.
Of what, sorry?
Of telcos, national telcos, concealing cyber warfare campaigns.
Concealing? Yeah. I've seen her. It's fairly well documented. Again, Iran is not just a one-off. I mean, the fact that the government or the military in Iran has a lot of control over the telco doesn't mean that in Western nations there is absolutely no connection. All right, there's always going to be some kind of synergy. There's always going to be like an insider guy that has the secret laptop or whatever. And yes, it's happening. Okay. Any more questions? We're completely out of time. No.